Ideally, you have a product owner that can produce effective backlogs. But the thing is, you need a backlog. 99.9% of the time when a team writes a backlog, they fill their backlog full of engineering tasks. And they put story points on engineering tasks. And sprint after sprint after sprint after sprint, they have the illusion that they're doing Scrum, and they're going through the mechanics of doing Scrum, and they're signing off on their activities like they're doing Scrum, and they're counting velocity like they're doing Scrum, but there's no working tested software. Or even if by their definition it's working tested software, if it's not shippable to a client, or it's not integratable into a larger ecosystem, like that's the challenge. So to me, like if I were going to say something like, how can I do Scrum without a product owner? Well, what I would say is that somebody on the team has to step into some sort of like product owner / business analyst capacity. Back in the early 90s, when I was getting out of college, there was a role that I would see published a lot. I don't know if it's published a lot anymore, called like a programmer analyst. And what they would do is they would almost serve like as a business analyst and a programmer. So they'd go spend time with the business people, understand what the software needed to do, and then, either I guess code it themselves or bring it back to their team, and their team would code it. So it's almost like that where, somebody's got to sit in the pocket and do that work. Maybe another way of looking at it is this gets back into where Teams Backlogs working tested software came from, is a story back from my version 1 days. And I went up to talk to a client in Boston, and we were working with 6 teams there. And they were having problems, obviously, getting Scrum working, right? So like 6 Scrum teams. And what the problem was is that they didn't have ready backlogs for the teams, right? The backlogs that they had weren't broken up in a way that was standard, right? They weren't using like Mike Cohn's user story stuff or Alistair Coburn's use case stuff, anything like that. So they weren't using anything like that. And so they didn't have backlogs. The teams, not all the teams were dedicated, so they couldn't produce stable velocity, and their hardware infrastructure allowed them not to be able to produce a working tested increment. So they were going down this path where they couldn't produce a working tested increment, and I didn't really think anything of it. It was a really small little consulting engagement, and I ended up weeks later, they wanted me to come back and I couldn't. So one of the other guys in my group, who was a Scrum trainer and a really good guy and a good Agile coach, went up there and kind of followed along behind me. And I remember he came back and he said, the problem is they don't have product owners. And I was like, fascinating. Would the presence of a product owner in that environment have helped them produce the backlog? And that's what I was really starting to hunt. So you can have a product owner that can't effectively produce a backlog, but you can also have effective backlogs, without having a product owner, right? Ideally, you have a product owner that can produce effective backlogs. But the thing is, you need a backlog. And so I've worked with teams, I've set up teams where the team and a product manager and some other people get together on regular cadences, and they co-create backlogs, and they're authoritative, and they meet all the conditions of a good backlog item. But for whatever reason, in their environment, the single product owner metaphor, the single wringable neck metaphor that Scrum uses, just wasn't going to work for them. So if I'm sitting on a team that's sitting there and says, I have no product owner, well, then what I would do is I would do something like this. We know as a team what good backlog looks like. So we go out to our business partners and we try to gather as much information as we possibly can. And then in good faith, we write the backlog items. And then as we write the backlog items, we feed them back to the business and we say, hey, this is what we've come up with. 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 And if they don't give any feedback, then we just build the stuff and we say, this is what we're delivering. This is what we're delivering. This is what we're delivering. And then we stabilize velocity against our known backlog. And then we start scheduling release meetings with our customers. And hopefully they come. Maybe they don't. Let's say we get to the point where it's time to ship and they haven't seen anything. And now they want to do invalidation. Okay, cool. They can validate late on the backside, but chances are some things are going to change. So if they want those things to change, then we turn them into user stories and we wash, rinse, repeat. But that's not what people do. What people do is they go, well, I don't have a product owner, so I'm going to load my backlog up full of technical tasks. So, and they go, well, that's not my job. It's not my job to do product ownership. It's not my job to be a business analyst. I'm a developer. So we just do developer things. And so there's ways to make it work, but sometimes what's involved is when you don't have an engaged business, is that you have to get it working without them. You have to show them the business benefit of it, and then you have to invite them to participate. So what it comes down to is you have to figure out, it's like, how do I get as close as I possibly can while still maintaining the values and principles of an Agile team or a Scrum team or an XP team? How do I get as close as possible? I always go back to teams, backlogs, working tests, and software. The definition of something working is, can the team establish stable velocity against the known backlog and produce a working tested increment?